Good morning, everyone. I'm Rhonda Burkhart from HCC, and we'll be placing this recording, as usual, on our website. And go ahead and share that. So it will be on the finance and state software redesign, and then the training recordings, and it'll be right here under these specific topics right there. And as discussed before on the previous training, these are going to be linked onto a YouTube. So it'll take you right to YouTube. You won't need a password or anything else. It'll take you right there, and then you can just play it. So this morning, we're discussing the vendor new hire reporting, and the vendor new hire, I've got some links here. This is the one for the specifications, and then the one below it is the actual reporting right here. So why do we need to do this? So it's part of the Ohio Revised Code, aka the law, state law, that all employers need to report employees and independent contractors. So the converse side of this would be the ODJFS new hire report. So they need to know when people are working for the benefit of child support. So it needs to be done every 20 days. Most districts do it once a month, and we, it's a good thing to put on the month-end checklist. And put it on that and check it off when you're doing other things that you do for month-end. There is a fine for that if you don't do it. So we found a few districts that have not been doing this. So we thought we'd do a webinar to cover this so that everyone can be doing what they need to do. This falls into one of those areas where you only know what you know, and sometimes you're not trained. Maybe, Jane Doe started doing, payables for ABC district, and her predecessor left suddenly. She didn't get educated on everything that she needed to know. So this is one of the things you need to do. So independent contractors, they need to be reported as new hires. And this is the way that we do it. It's built into Redesign USAS. So if you go to the vendor screen, there's a series of items that you can check off to look at this. So we'll go into our demo instance here, into our core vendors. And so I've added these on the grid. You just click on that More button. And here under the New Hire section, you would want to check these off. You would also want to check off the year-to-date total. So after you've done that, made those selections, then you can go in and start to filter. So the requirements just for reviewing vendors are over 2,500. You would want your active vendors reported is going to be false. The ones that are true have already been reported. And so if you're going down and, maybe it's been, you've been putting in vendors and you hadn't known about this, you might want to say, oh, we're looking for people. So it's, someone who would probably get a 1099. So that would be a good thing to look for. So at this first one, this Darren Cooley, he's active vendor. He's had a year-to-date total of 63,0740. This person's marked as not reportable. So let's take a look at Darren. All right, so his year-to-date total is above the 2,500 limit, and he's got his 1099 fields, his Social Security. He's got a Social Security number there, and he gets an NEC. He gets a 1099 NEC, but he's not on the new hire. So right? If it's his SSN, then he really should be in the reportable, and you should, I just copy his down here. Maybe he has, I'm just going to make up a birth date, and you actually find out what his actual birth date is. The birth date is, they say it's, not mandatory, but it does appear as an error on the report if you run that. And the month, I usually just put in 12. We'll just save that person. So you go through, you want to check your vendors just to make sure everybody who needs to be reportable is reportable. Wait till that's saved. And our computer needs its cup of coffee this morning. There we go. Okay. So going back to this. So as I said before, they need to have payments of $2,500 or more to be reported and to be picked up on the report. And then when they are selected, then it will go back and for this person, after they've been reported, then the system will do a check mark on the reported box saying they have been reported for the year, and it will fill in the last reported date. Going back to where we are. The fields, which are back, we'll use Cooley for an example. So the ID field, the birth date, the begin date, the month, that will be the same as what they are on the Ohio new hire form fields. If you filled in a paper form, then that would be the date of hire, the date of birth, the date payments will begin. If you don't fill anything in on the date the payments begin, then it will just go retroactively back to January 1st of the calendar year. It's going to use your current period for when it's pulling the information. And then down here, it has the length of time. So again, the ID numbers, the social security number. As it said, the birth date of the business owner or the individual is optional, but it does appear as an error on the report. I can see where it would want that. You might have somebody named John Brown, and how many John Browns are there? And the birth date helps the state figure out who that person is. So here's the fields on the report versus the fields on the vendor screen. And when you've got those all figured out, then you would go under report, and then the vendor new hire report that's close to the bottom there, and select that. If you wanted to run this, say you're at the end of the calendar year and you're doing this for December, and you're so focused on your 1099s, and then you flip over into January, and then you go back and you're like, oh, I forgot to do this. You would actually need to go back and set December as your current period. You don't have to reopen it, but you need to set it as the current period. All right, so on our handout, this is what the screen looks like. So there's a few fields here: reported date, projection report, calculate date, and then there's a force vendors field. So the reported date is the date that's going to populate on the last reported date on the screen. So it's going to populate right there. So whatever date you put in there will populate. The projection report, so this is like a projection and an actual file. So the projection date will not, when it's checked, it will not update the reported flag or the last reported date. You can run that as much as you want, and it won't update that. When it's unchecked, that's when you're doing your actuals. The calculate date payments begin, when it's checked, it used the current calendar year, I just always leave that checked because that's what it wants it from. That's what the state wants it from. Otherwise, it's going to go back to those fields where it was like date payments begin, and you don't want to do that for all your vendors. I just leave it checked. If you have a situation, I've run across this one time, when you need to force a vendor in for some reason or other, then you can pull them in off this available vendors and add them in. And when you run the report, you would click this little box up here to force them to be included. And then if you want to take them out, then remove, there's a remove selected box there. And of course, show report options. I always leave that checked as well. There we go again, the force vendors, covered that. And there's a few formats that are allowed, but let's go ahead and run and see what we've got here. So we're going to go into report, vendor, new hire report. Okay. And this system date here is September 2021 because it's a demo instance. Normally you would leave the date or, maybe at the end of the period, whatever. I'm only changing this because it is the demo instance. 30 because the system thinks it's in September of 2021. I'm leaving the projection checked. I just want the projection. I don't want to update with any dates. I want to see what I've got in the PDF format. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run the report. So it's going to give me all those vendors who are reportable with over 2,500. Okay. So I see it's got my query parameters up there because I wanted the options. Okay, so here's what we get for the projection report. And the system is going to add this little verbiage up here saying it is a projection report. The vendors have not been set to reported. So I've got a few people on here. Here's that new one that we added, the Darren Cooley. I've got this person here. Notice they've all got their birth dates in. We don't, the date payments begin, we're fine with a calendar year. But then we've got an asterisk, and this is how the system lets you know that there's a problem. So if you ran a actual right now, Snow White wouldn't be on it because there's a problem. And the problem is the birth date is blank. So we want to update the birth date. As we said, it's this, according to my documentation, it's optional, but the system wants this. So we're going to go back to Snow White back here on our core vendors. We're just going to go ahead and filter. And we're going to update Miss White so she's reportable. Like she doesn't have her ID in there either, but she's reported. She's on her 1099 NEC. So we've got the ID right there. We know it's an SSN. So this is the type of vendor we're looking for. And we gave Miss White a little call and we just said, okay, your birth date is Valentine's Day in 1979, we'll say, right? And then no begin date means that she'll just pull from the calendar year. All right. So we've put everything in that's required. Go ahead and run a second report now that we've fixed any issues. Oh. All right. And we're going to generate that again. Now we have a clean report. There's no warnings or errors, and there's no asterisk. So everybody is in here that needs to be reported. You know, we're going to be sending this up to the state. It's going to have their social security number, names, address, their birth date. They'll be able to find this person easily if they need to pay child support. A lot of these you do and you report to the state and they don't need to pay child support, but we just have to report that anyway. So then we'll go through and we're going to uncheck projection because we want the actual. And there are a few file formats which it wants. And so we'll look at this afterwards. We'll look at Miss White and see that the system will update that new hire section with that reporting date, and it will check her off. And she won't be on the report again. Once she's reported, that's it. So it's not a cumulative thing. It is just whoever made the cutoff this month or 20 days. So I took this screenshot from another a district. I was assisting another district. And so there's a couple of different layouts it allows. There's Excel, there's a fixed width test, there's a CSV, and there's a tab delimited. With the district I was assisting, we tried the text version because that seemed like the best one. When you run the Excel option, it looks like this. Let's give an example here. So it looks like this. So it's the Excel option is it looks like a PDF stuck in an Excel file. I'm not sure if that works or not. I'd love to hear some feedback from someone if they've done this successfully and you know, which format is the best. With the district I was assisting, she only had one or two, kind of like what we have in our example, and she just entered it manually into the system. So I'm just going to go ahead and go back. We'll finish this up. Again, we have a reported date of 9/30/21 with a projection report. And did it PDF. So you can see the difference here where there isn't a system note saying it's a projection. So these have all been updated. So we'll take a look at Miss White in the system. Go back to core vendors. Portable and over 250. And so now the reported is true. So on her screen, you'll see that the reported is marked and it filled in that reported date, which we had put on the screen earlier, that 9/30/2021. So you just want to be careful of when you're reporting, you know, maybe like today's date and before. If you're going to do that, usually people just leave it on the date they're reporting. So just leave it on to date. So that she's all marked there, and then you would go to the website and submit it there. Again, if anybody has done this and done it successfully with a submission file, please let me know. The only district that I've worked with this, they had to actually manually enter it into the system. So I'm just going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and see. Can you see the dot here? Oh, no. Okay. It's just doing something. Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
There's one question in the chat about how districts are collecting birth dates for vendors. And I don't know if you know that or if maybe anybody else can pipe up.
I don't know. I would just, I mean, on the vendor screen, you're going to have their email and their phone number. I would suggest You know, birthday's kind of like one of those confidential items. I would give them a call personally just to get it. Kind of like sharing a password, I think, or getting a social security number. So that's my thought on it. Does anybody else have any other thoughts about the birth date? And go ahead and unmute yourself if you need to, and we can share in this discussion with your experiences on it. And then, has anybody submitted this before successfully via a file done through the vendor new hire report? Yeah, Susan asked from CNE, she said, is the new hire reporting center ODJFS? So it's, I believe it is. We can actually click on it. And so if we do a control click here, yeah, it's ODJFS right here. That's where that will take you. And so that will direct you where to go. I think the one is a little bit different from the other. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. There we are. Sorry about that. So it is the ODJFS New Hire Reporting Center. So you would need a login and password to get onto that. Again, it's telling you 20 days of the date of hire, when they start working, when they get paid, to submit that. So there's that. And then on the other part up here, way at the top, this has a kind of a question, frequently asked questions center. Why is it required? Who's required to report? What are my options? And some other helpful information there. So it's all listed right below there. So that's where the links are that are in the guide. So yes, it is ODJFS. And it's just the USAS side of that ODJFS. As you would do the ODJFS new hire report, but then this is the USAS side of it for independent contractors. So are there any other questions? Has anybody done this successfully through a file submission? And what was your method to do it? Wait a little bit, if someone's typing. All right. So the district I did have, they only, they just submitted it just by typing it into the ODJFS system. So we know that one works. So if anybody has an update and maybe they've tried this and were successful with a file submission, we'd appreciate hearing back from you, and then we can update and circulate this to the others. So with we're all in this together, and if someone gets new information, you know, it's great if we get that, and then we can communicate it to others. All right. So we'll go ahead and we'll stop the recording, and we'll post this on our website as stated earlier. And we hope you all have a great day. And thank you for joining us. We hope you found this useful.